just to reassure the fans. A lot of people seem to think that you've kind of retired into the background. You're going to be living in the woods. You're, in the back room with a bottle of whiskey and in a rocking chair with the shotgun. You're going to cast it all in. Just let the fans know that you're still feeling mentally sound.
I'm doing fine. I don't need a wellness check or anything.
You're not suffering ontological shock.
No, that would be great if we just go with aliens.
What's up, you scholars of enlightenment? Dr. Sam Gregson, particle physicist here again. I hope you've had a fantastic week and have a brilliant weekend in store. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the US Congress heard hearings during which speakers claimed that the government is covering up its knowledge of UFOs. Unsurprisingly, the hearings generated huge interest in the US and around the world as it heard from three key witnesses, including David Grusch, a whistleblower former intelligence officer who in June claimed that the US has possession of intact and partially intact alien vehicles and even alien bodies. Another speaker, former military pilot David Faragher, recalled his legendary tale of engaging a tic-tac-shaped UAP, while fellow former pilot Ryan Graves reiterated claims that service personnel have been seeing bizarre and unexplained craft in the sky for years, sometimes on a daily basis. UFOs have become a high-profile news story in recent years. The US military says that it's actively trying to investigate the small number of sightings for which there is no obvious explanation. As the hearing unfolded, there were no new revelations about where we might find alien craft or alien bodies, but there was a promise from the witnesses that this is not the final word and there will be much, much more to come. To help me dig into these astonishing hearings and the out-of-this-world claims that were made, see what I did there? I'm joined by two phenomenal special guests. First of all, UAP skeptic and debunker, Mick West. Mick is a British science writer, skeptical investigator, and retired video game programmer. He's the creator of the websites Contrail Science and Metabunk, and he investigates and debunks pseudoscientific claims and conspiracy theories, such as those of chemtrails and UFOs. He has appeared in various media, including CBS, BBC, CNN, Radio New Zealand, and Scientific American, as an expert conspiracy analyst and science communicator. He's also appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast. Secondly, I'm joined by defense technology, robotics, and sensor expert, Dr. Ramsey Faragher. Ramsey is an expert in electronics, navigation, and sensor fusion. He's a Bi-Fellow of Queen's College, Cambridge, and the CTO, President, and Director of Focal Point Positioning Limited. He is a real-life James Bond Q, according to Top Gear magazine. So who better to help me unravel just what we should take from the recent hearings? Okay, so Mick, the Congressional UAP hearings occurred on July the 26th, 2023, a couple of weeks ago now. What are your overall feelings now that the dust has settled? It's been a couple of weeks.
Well, I was very disappointed, really, by the hearings. I was expecting more whistleblowers, really, to be true. And we got three people. Two of them were pilots that we'd heard from before, David Faragher and Ryan Graves. And the other one, David Grusch, and we'd also heard from before, just a few weeks earlier, with this article that was published in is it the Debrief?
Yeah, the Debrief.
And then the News Nation interview and the coverage from there, and a little bit, and there was like a French interview that he did as well. But really, there's been very little coming out of it. It raises a lot of questions. Why does he believe this stuff, if he does actually believe it, which I think he probably does. And what's actually going on? What's the basis for this belief? Is there like an element of truth in that there might be hidden programs somewhere? Probably there aren't aliens. So what's actually happening? It was people say that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, And I think what we have here so far is extraordinary claims balanced with a negative, an extraordinary lack of evidence.
Do you think the feeling I got from listening to it is that really what this kind of was a reading into the official record of a lot of kind of UFO lore and these shaggy dog stories that have been kind of hanging around for a long time, the ones that are more prominent. So you talked about David Fravor there, who's been on, Joe Rogan talking about this. He's someone that anyone who knows about UFOs tends to know about. Was this kind of almost a kind of legitimizing and reading into that public record of a lot of this kind of backlog of stuff that's been hanging around for, if not 10 years, the more recent stuff, even decades?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely part of what they were doing. And this is, to be clear, it's a concerted effort by a small group of people to try to push a particular narrative. Some people believe that there is this secret crash retrieval program, and some people believe that UFOs are aliens, and they're just trying to raise the public awareness of those claims, and getting things before a congressional committee is a great way of doing that. Really, though, like I was saying, nothing is new. And in fact, some of the things, as you alluded to, are very, very old. Yeah. The earliest case he mentioned goes back to 1933, which is
the Italian one with the
Italian one. Yes, there's. Yeah, apparently like a UFO crashed in the town of Magenta in Italy in 1933. It was kept by the Italians for 11 years. I'm not sure what they did with it during that time. And at the end of World War II in 1944 or 45, the UFO was captured by the Americans with the help of the Vatican, who facilitated the transport through wartime Europe. So it's this very bizarre story, which is also very old. It's not a new story at all. And I think the interesting thing about that is that he said in the French article, he specifically said this was something that he was cleared to talk about. And that raises a lot of questions, like why is he cleared to talk about this super secret thing going back 70 years if it's true? But then if it wasn't true, they would clear him to talk about it. They clear you to talk about things that are not true. And I kind of think that's what's happened.
I think, Ramsey, this isn't kind of in the order I was going to do it, but you raised this point, didn't you, about this idea that of things that can be unclassified because they're not true. Maybe if I can flag up a couple of the things that you linked on the document when we were working on the questions. Do you want to dive a little bit further into that, Ramsey, and some of the thoughts you had around?
Yeah, this is definitely the thing that has intrigued me the most about the whistleblowers' explanations, that all of the information that they're providing are unclassified. And we believe that's the case because it was suggested that it has indeed been cleared that he's an ex-official, he went through a process, and at the other side of the process, they said, there's nothing classified in this information that you've written down. But there's lots of unclassified information about highly classified things when you go looking for them. So you flagged up one here that there's the information on official websites about how there's new work into novel defenses against biological warfare agents. Well, nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare agents are all highly classified, as are anything to do with defending against them. So that stuff is highly classified. There's an article about the fact that they're working on it, an unclassified article about it.
You've got another one on quantum technology as well, which is...
Some stuff is huge at the moment and will be underpinning all sorts of incredibly sensitive and classified technologies across computing, cryptography, navigation, sensing in the next couple of decades. But there's loads of public domain information on official websites about the fact that they're doing work in these areas. And if you click onto the final one...
Yes.
So that's the sort of news articles search page on that US Department of Defense website. And if you pop in UAP, I think 17 articles come up, including stuff about transcripts of recent discussions and stuff like that. Yeah. The key thing is the whistleblower could have written articles like the ones we've just read that are like, hey, there are alien bodies. Disclosure is here. We have aliens. It's true. We have their bodies. Can't tell you where they are. Here's some of the bits and pieces. We've got crash ships. Can't tell you how many. But fact, aliens, we've got them. if it was true and unclassified, then he could write an article about it and it could be searchable on here, and it would be a real stamp of authority that it was true. But the other type of unclassified information is stuff that's not true.
As Mick said, is this stuff that, I'm 1,000 feet tall. I can talk about that. That's not classified because it's just nonsense.
Yeah. And this is the sort of thing it's just a bit uneasy for me. I think there would have been a way for them to put a lot more weight around it being true if they used these sorts of channels to write about classified information in an unclassified way, like quantum technologies or biological warfare agent defenses. He could have written an article about how we discovered aliens, but he didn't.
And I guess that the way that it's been brought out, another point that you kind of alluded to there, Mick, is that a lot of the people who are bringing this out, so we talked about Grusch, for example, being involved with this hearing, they all seem to go through, as you've kind of flagged up in the past, this small group of people in the background. What do you make of the idea that, again, one of the most serious people who's coming forward on this, David Grusch, is again linked to this small group of characters in the background that you kind of alluded to when you gave your first answer there?
Yeah, well, there's kind of a mixture of characters in the background there. The gentleman directly behind Grusch, the guy in the blue tie, is his lawyer, I think Charles McCulloch, who is a very serious person. He was the first Inspector General of the intelligence community. So someone who is, pretty high up in the intelligence community and the legal aspects of that. And he is now representing, or so it seems, he doesn't really talk very much about it, David Grusch. His law firm previously represented him in his whistleblower complaint.
Yeah.
That was kind of more narrowly focused. They didn't really talk about the alien stuff. And in fact, they issued a statement saying, the scope of our representation did not include the claims that have been made in the media or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And now it seems like McCulloch, who used to work for that firm, has kind of gone out on his own for some reason and is standing behind Grusch. So, that's somebody that's actually quite serious. But then on either side of him, there's two characters that have been kind of in the UFO community for a long time, George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. George Knapp on the left there. And George Knapp is a longtime advocate of Bob Lazar, who is a person who kind of makes the same claims as David Grusch, but is widely considered, even within the UFO community, to be a fraud.
I've seen him on things like Jesse Ventura's conspiracy thing, 20 years ago, saying similar things.
Exactly. And he says that, we have crashed alien sources in Area 51. In fact, his claims are a bit more extreme. Like he says there was a hangar where they had like 7 of them in a row and things like that. I don't think Grusch made claims of that nature, but it's very, very unreputable. And George Knapp over the years had promoted other people who are also like kind of fairly extreme people, like William Cooper, the author of Behold the Pale Horse. And there's a guy called Lear, who I think is the son of the person who invented the Learjet, who's also a big kind of weird conspiracy theory. Then on the other side, we have Jeremy Corbell, who with
Mr. Green Triangles, is that?
Yeah, has been releasing. He's a lovely guy. I met him once in a bathroom and shook his hand. And he's a delightful person, and he's gained the trust of a lot of people, and apparently people in the military. I think he lives near a military base, and people have been sending him videos, and he's been releasing them over the years. But every single video he releases is either like just some fuzzy dot in the background, or it's something that's been conclusively explained. The two biggest examples are the green triangle you alluded to, which was just an effect of the camera, and the other one was the 29 Palms UFO, which they said was a giant football field size flying craft, which kind of sounds like the stuff David Grusch has been talking about, but turns out to be flares and turned out to be something that was misidentified by a large number of people. So he's promoting these things that turned out to be false, which makes you think, like, what's the standard of evidence that Grusch is actually are the people who have told Grusch things? People have told Grusch that there was a football field-sized craft. Maybe it's the same type of thing as the nonsense that Jeremy Corbell has been popularizing.
So I guess the question becomes that the pushback you'll receive on that, Mick, is that, you know, these are people who've been on the UFO beat for, you know, decades. You know, they're very prominent people in this field. So obviously they're having their day in court, as it were. Now, obviously they're going to be there because now they're being vindicated, they're being taken seriously. So they're front and center. But then on the other side of it, you have the idea that they're involved with this ORSAP and ATIP, and some of these characters are anyway, not pictured here, but that they're also involved in some of these shadier conspiracy-addled ideas. So there's kind of a little bit of cover in the idea that they've been sort of on this beat for a long time, but also there's some quite unsavory characters here, isn't there? Or aren't there? Excuse me.
Well, I don't know if I'd say unsavory as such, but I wouldn't call them entirely, neutral witnesses. George Knapp wrote a book called Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which is basically filled with ghost stories. And one of the characters in the book is Jay Stratton, who became the head of the UAP task force and worked with Grusch. Stratton was the boss of the UAP task force when Grusch was there, and quite possibly was one of the people that Grusch talked to, and maybe one of the people who convinced him that there was something to this. But Stratton, if you read George Knapp's book, George Knapp, the guy right there in the background, basically believes in a manifestation of something that appears to be ghost-like and appears to manifest things like werewolves. And this was apparently like some kind of psychic hitchhiker that he picked up at Skinwalker Ranch, and he went home with him and infected his wife and children, and they started seeing ghosts and werewolves. And he's the guy who probably told Grusch a lot of the stuff that he has been hearing. So it's that's Jay Stratton right there. And Jay Stratton in this photo you're talking about is being interviewed by George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. So there's this very small group of people that are involved. And it's not just these people here, there are other people here. Why is Jeremy Corbell in the background? Why don't we have some of the more serious people, like Gary Nolan, for example? Gary Nolan is he was a scientist. He's a microbiologist, I think, and he's very much in the play here. He actually just started a non-profit organization with Grusch, and he's like another person who believes in essentially these almost quasi-supernatural or directly supernatural aspects of it. But he's an actual scientist. So if you're going to have someone who adds weight to the conversation behind them, you would pick someone like him.
So there's a couple of questions that spin out of that. I guess, first of all, one of the questions was, are there other witnesses that you'd like to have seen? And I guess going on that list, therefore, is someone like Jay Stratton here, who was the ex-head of the UAP task force, maybe someone like Travis Taylor. Are those people that you would have liked to see interviewed to add a bit more of a kind of first hand to this, rather than it being very much hearsay about what has been said?
It's kind of bemusing that Stratton wasn't there. I mean, Stratton is, he's not like he's this shy retiring type. He now appears regularly on TV on The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, a TV show about that same supernatural ranch that George Knapp wrote about. I saw him in person at AlienCon. It's the convention that celebrates the show Ancient Aliens and the Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, and a show that I'm actually on, which is called The Proof Is Out There, where you try to actually analyze things unlike the other shows. But yeah, he's someone who's appeared on TV. He's not afraid of the spotlight, and he's someone who's more senior than David Grusch, someone who has probably a higher security clearance, at least the same. We know that he has what's called Title 50 clearance, which is the more active security clearance where you get to actually do things. And he's talked about this type of thing in the past. He talked about reverse engineering programs in AlienCon up on stage. In my notes, he mentioned reverse engineering. So he's definitely a person who should have been up there, and because he's probably more of a first-hand witness than David Grusch. So why not? Why wasn't he there?
Do you think
we know that there were actually other people who were going to be there, at least two other people. and it's the reason they weren't there. Some people say that their background checks didn't play out. Some people said that they were warned off by the Pentagon. But I wonder if Stratton was one of those people.
Do you wonder if maybe one of the possible reasons they weren't there was this kind of the hearing tried to make a very kind of, it didn't focus on any of those aspects, that you talk about Skinwalker Ranch and ORSAP and these sort of roots of a lot of this and a lot of the characters involved. Do you think potentially there was a little bit of discussion and an attempt to make a kind of firewall between those crazier claims and the people that were presented, perhaps?
It's possible, yeah. I mean, I think the intent of this hearing is partly to force investigation, but also partly PR.
Yeah,
they want to raise the awareness of the narrative that they're pushing, that UFOs are aliens, and you don't want people who come across as crazy. I don't think Stratton would in the hearing, but he has said things in the past that are a bit unusual. And the other people too, like say Travis Taylor, who worked for Stratton as his chief scientist, has a lot of people find him somewhat laughable because of his appearances on TV, where he plays essentially a character of someone who strongly believes in the ancient aliens hypothesis and makes all these really wild claims and very speculative inferences that don't make any scientific sense whatsoever, and does these terrible experiments and misinterprets the results and gets the math wrong and does all kinds of things. So he probably wouldn't be someone who would appear reputable if people started looking into his background. But I think Stratton he's not been tinged too much by that. There's a little bit of it in his background, but he should have been there. But yeah, I do think they probably picked their witnesses to be as credible as possible, which is why you had those two pilots.
Yeah,
the most
that's what I was
boring
going to say. It's
possible.
sort of a nice shield, isn't it? Because as you've seen and as you've been sort of victim of, is if you push back against these people, there's an inbuilt sort of response of, why are you pushing back against these heroes? These are, distinguished fighter pilots who've served the country. They know what they saw. And you get that kind of vitriolic response immediately. So they seem to have been well chosen to present a respectable face.
Well, I think this is an interesting point as well.
Sorry, go ahead, Ramsey.
Sorry, I think this is an interesting point about. I always find this funny about like marketing information and stuff. When you see something you think is just like a terrible advert, and you think, what was on the cutting room floor if this is what they've gone with? And in terms of like how bad was all of the other stuff that they were picking from? If what we ended up with,
it's interesting. Yeah,
huge.
If this is the survivorship bias, if this is the Spitfire with the bullets in it, what was before? Yeah,
So I mean, to bring up Skinwalker Ranch, right? If any of that stuff was real at all, if any of their data was valid, if anything, if there was one thing you could go and stand there and go, if you look up over there, you're going to see a ship come out of the sky and then go back again. Just wait, you'll see it. If any of that was real at all, and you could demonstrate that it was real, that would have been the most important thing, would have been top of the list. A public piece of information gathered by a member of the public in an open space, showing a craft popping in and out of existence on loads of video over many seasons with a LiDAR scan thrown in for fun. None of that was there. And this is the thing that just I struggle to even put into words as we've gone through like the sort of Jay Stratton story, the Travis
the
Taylor
credulity that I've seen shown by like a lot of serious people just boggles my mind, to be honest. I just can't.
I can't draw a connection between that show through these people to credible information that could have or should have been put on the table in that meeting. There was none of it. There hasn't been a single. I mean, what does it tell you if you've got all of these people who have been claiming to have been investigating this for such a long time, and there wasn't a single photograph or video that someone could come in and go, I can vouch that I went along to that place as a completely independent person to a place I was taken to, and sure enough, there was a cube inside a sphere just as we were being told by the pilots every day. They were there every day. Like, there's been no one has been able to go and reproduce any of this stuff. But supposedly,
and nobody outside of this group seems to be talking much. They all seem to be kind of hermetically sealed within it.
I mean, just look at what's going on right now with the superconductor stuff, right? One scrap of evidence, tiny rumor on archive that there might be a room temperature superconductor, and everyone all over the planet has dropped everything and tried to reproduce it. And yet we don't have a single picture of a cube and a sphere that are apparently floating around everywhere, all over every day, apparently. So it just doesn't add up from a evidence perspective. It just isn't.
Yeah. There's a kind of a curious disconnect between the magnitude of the claims that are being made and the magnitude of the response.
Yeah.
Like, you know, even just if you take the Skinwalker Ranch stuff, you know, they're claiming that they've got, you know, good evidence that people have been infected by interdimensional ghosts, and that they see UAPs there. Yeah, Jay Stratton at AlienCon specifically said that the things that are being seen at Skinwalker Ranch are the same type of things that our pilots are seeing. You know, so he's saying, like, here is a place where you can go and you can see UFOs all the time. And if you watch the show, they're always going like, UAP, UAP. They're always doing that. Like every episode, like a little white dot flies over and they point at it, or a light flies over. But, you know, it's obviously just nothing. But yeah, there's the claims they are making are not backed up by the evidence, and they're not backed up even by hidden evidence. Because if there was hidden evidence, there would be more of a response. You know, and some of the stuff that they talk about on Skinwalker Ranch, if you watch the TV show, it's like you're following this exciting journey where they're trying to uncover like certain things, and then they discover things. But you got to realize this was all filmed 6 months ago. If they've discovered conclusive evidence of a giant spaceship buried under the mesa, then we would have heard about it by now. Nobody seems to care about it.
Yeah,
they're going to put it in the can for 6 months until it shows on the History Channel. No, it's the most groundbreaking piece of science in all of human history, and yet it's just one silly little show on the History Channel.
They're skipping over all the Nobel Prizes, Mick.
Yeah.
All about the TV ratings.
Those History Channel dollars must be pretty good. So what did you make, Mick, of the three witnesses that we saw? So we saw David Faragher, who is this ex-pilot, also Ryan Graves, who is this ex-aviator as well, David Grusch, who is obviously this ex military intelligence officer. What did you make of the choice of those three? We said, look, these seem, you know, on paper to be quite reputable people, probably a good choice. You know, all involved with the military. So you've got that sort of inbuilt defense that if you sort of go after them, it's like you're going after our heroes and our serious people who've been defending the nation. What did you make of those three people and what they kind of had to say on the top line?
Well, first of all, I think there was a little strange thing in that we've got David Grusch, who's the whistleblower about crashed flying saucers, and then we've got two pilots who are witnesses to UFOs, and it's almost like they're completely different things.
Yeah.
We've got these flying things that people see in the sky, and then we've got this weird rumors of this crash retrieval program, and there doesn't seem to be very much connection between them. Now, the hearing was prompted by David Grusch and his whistleblower complaint, and by the article in the debrief and the News Nation coverage. That's what prompted the actual hearing to take place. It wasn't this stuff about the pilots. The pilots have been saying the exact same thing for years. David Faragher's account first appeared like in a fictional form back in 2008. Someone published a little novel that actually had his account in it. And then I think it was something around 2010 or something, 2012, someone wrote an online article about his account, and the video itself leaked, back, I think, again in 2008 or something like that, maybe even earlier. So these are really, really old things. Why are they just now coming to congressional attention? If there were things that required attention, why wasn't that attention given back to them back then? The story that David Faragher gave and all his responses and everything is exactly the same as it has been for years. It's not a new story.
I'm sorry, Mick. I'll just pick on one really important thing about what you're saying there as well, that they leaked. right? So Faragher recorded a copy of his highly classified material on those tapes before handing them over to the Air Force personnel or whoever it was that came and took them. And then, as you say, at some point later, this footage that really has been traced back to a pilot recording it leaked. And so it is the little glimpse of some pathway where something real that really did get recorded on a platform has made its way onto the internet, into the world, and someone can stand up and go, I recorded that. Where's all of the other leaks of photos?
Great point. That's a really good point.
Aliens and photos of the 40 crash retrievals. If it's possible for someone to, we will never find out who leaked that stuff on the internet. And that's how it works. That's how a lot of this stuff works. Just leaks onto the internet, and at some point they go, we're going to have to declassify that. There's now pictures of that real thing on the internet. It's in the public domain, therefore it's no longer top secret. And this is, I don't understand, if people are sitting on this evidence, it can be leaked so trivially that it boggles the mind that it hasn't been.
Yeah, and we do see lots of leaks of really crappy videos. The gimbal one is perhaps the best one. It wasn't really leaked; it was kind of got out. But the FLIR 1 video, which it wasn't taken by Faragher, it was taken by another pilot later on, Chad Underwood. But that video from the Nimitz of the Tic Tac, which just shows a fuzzy blob, but which isn't really Tic Tac shaped in the distance, that was just somebody on the ship saw the video and just recorded it on their little video camera and then took it out. We see lots of other things like that. We see iPhone recordings of radar screens and iPhone recordings of other videos, and even like videos that are kind of direct recordings that have been leaked. And the green triangle one appears to be like the original file essentially. Well, so why not? Yeah, why not more?
Yeah, and the cell phone footage taken from inside cockpits of stuff that pilots were flying past. Pretty sure you're not supposed to be flying around with your iPhone out. Like they're sort of breaking rules, taking video footage while flying aircraft on an object that's FOD and shouldn't have been on the runway, unless there's some strange pathway about if it's a training flight, it's okay or whatever. But we actually keep seeing rule breaking anyway with these things. And so it's just very hard to believe that we're getting so many of these naughty leaks of helium balloons, and not getting any naughty leaks of dead bodies of aliens inside, known Air Force like facilities with known people in the background whose faces you can double check. Oh yeah, that's the doctor that works on that airbase. None of it seems to exist, but it's trivial to do it, especially in this day and age. So
yeah, definitely. And I think I've actually heard people offer counter arguments to that, which are kind of getting into ridiculous conspiracy theory things. Like they say that the things that have been leaked are deliberately poor so that people think that that's all that there is.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really make any sense.
Self-sealing,
like,
though, isn't it?
These are still all individual people sending us stuff. Like, there's this big 29 Palms thing that happened recently. Like there was like 5 or 6 different people taking videos of it and sending it in. It wasn't anything classified or anything like that, and they weren't even doing anything wrong. It's just all these military people at the same time thought they saw a giant UFO, and a few of them sent it to Jeremy Corbell, who then sat on the video for 2 years apparently, and then released it, and then it was instantly debunked as being flares. But yeah, if things are happening on a regular basis within the military, we will be seeing a lot more of these little leaked videos, because they are super easy to get out and pretty easy to anonymize, especially if it's something like on an aircraft carrier where you have 2,000 people on it. It wouldn't be possible to track down where it actually came from. So we're not seeing anybody. Kind of indicates maybe there isn't that much, if any, of the genuine footage.
Just to pull on one of those threads you kind of alluded to there, Mick. You said that there's this strange sort of mashup between David Grusch, who prompted this hearing, and then the pilots who've kind of been talking about this for a while. Do you think, and maybe this is a bit too into speculation territory, that the kind of the qualifications and the kind of gravitas of the pilots was used as a kind of a little bit of a crowbar to to talk about things that are a bit more speculative from David Grusch. You know, you've got these pilots who are talking about things they say they saw, you know, on radar. These have been part of the record for a long time, and they were just sort of used to kind of smuggle in things that are a bit more speculative about alien bodies and, you know, massive TARDIS crafts and things like this.
Yeah, I think perhaps it's kind of a combination of things. I think the people who want to promote this also wanted to promote David Fravor, and they also wanted to promote Ryan Graves, who has like an organization called Americans for Safe Aerospace, which is kind of based on, you know, investigating UAPs under the guise of we need to do it because the airspace will be safer, even though UAPs have never caused a crash in all of human history.
Does he also have a strange business in? Is he the one who's got this strange business in alien materials or something that he claims?
He briefly worked. He briefly worked for a company called Quantum Generative Materials, which is run by a guy called Deep Prasad, who's this young kind of wunderkind scientist who claims to be going to use artificial intelligence and knowledge about how UAPs appear to behave to create metamaterials using artificial intelligence to replicate the novel characteristics of UFOs. He probably couches it rather differently in his investor brief, but it's, you know, basically that. And Ryan Graves was briefly, I think, the chief technology officer at that company, which was rather strange. And then he left and started his own, you know, kind of podcast and a company called Merged, and also now is starting this Americans for Safe Aerospace. There's all these little organizations crop up. Grusch himself is starting an organization as well. But back to the point though, like, you know, is who's giving who gravitas here? They're promoting the pilot's testimony by riding on the coattails of Grusch, who has this amazing story, but also the pilot's testimony kind of acts like a cooling rod for Grusch's nuclear testimony, which is so extreme that it might lead people to kind of, you know, switch off, because like he's talking about all this crazy stuff like, you know, malevolent aliens murdering people, but then the pilots come in and say, oh yeah, we saw a UFO and it's a bit of an issue because, you know, it's causing us problems, so we should investigate, and hoorah. So, you know, it works both ways.
And you flagged up, Ramsey, when we were sort of going through the things that they said, particularly things that Ryan Graves said about UAP being seen off the bows of these ships every day. A lot of this stuff doesn't seem to have been updated with new things that we've seen. So he was talking again about these cubes within spheres again, but we've seen these kind of things since, right? And people have talked about what these things might be, but we still seem to be at this, whenever these encounters happen, 2008 or whatever, we still seem to be just accepting them as they were said at the time, without any of the kind of potential debunking or potential alternate hypotheses that people have come up with being discussed in these hearings.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, as I was sort of saying before, it would be lovely if these people who are clearly so determined and interested in getting the point across that they think it's all real, if in all of this intervening period of time we've had many, many, many years now, they'd managed to get together with an Avi Loeb or Gary Nolan or anyone else with some resources and interest in doing some science, and going and gathering some data, which is how you actually prove your hypothesis or disprove your hypothesis, by going and trying to reproduce whatever it is. And so, yeah, as I said before, I find it a bit disingenuous for people to claim that they were seeing weird stuff every single day in a particular area, and yet they've never organized someone to go over there with a Cessna and a video camera and get any of it. And as we've discussed before, and as lots of people have mentioned on the internet in various places, a cube within a sphere, to anyone who works in electronic warfare, immediately springs a radar reflector corner cube and a balloon to mind. And sure enough, these things exist. that famous patent all over the place, but you can actually go find Google Images stuff of things like this.
Mhm.
I've come across academic papers of these things the wheel being reinvented, of researchers in different bits of the world talking about these compact, self-inflating corner cube reflectors, which are an entire balloon with reflective foil inside, so the thing's tiny, but it inflates up into a big corner cube reflector that is also a balloon. Blah blah blah. So,
and if we think about the Chinese spy balloon,
fly.
If we think about the Chinese spy balloon issue that happened, a few months back now, maybe a year back, we saw when we opened up the radar windows, we saw all these sort of things pop out and people showing that these sort of things can happen. And yet and we can see more things on radars when we change windows and such. And yet we're still going back to these stories from the Nimitz where they were changing their radars and then suddenly they saw all these weird things. It just seems bizarre that we're kind of stuck with these old stories that have not perfect explanations, but at least reasonable alternate hypotheses that don't need to invoke aliens or anything particularly exotic. Yes, we don't understand them fully. Yes, there are gaps in knowledge. Yes, we would like to explain them fully. But that doesn't require us to then bring in these crazy alien hypotheses. I find it so odd that we're stuck, Mick, you've been studying this for a long time, at these stories from long time ago without ever kind of moving on.
I think there's kind of a reason for that, and I think it kind of boils down to them being military-based stories, and the explanation for them would have to come from the military, but the military is extraordinarily secretive and basically classifies pretty much everything by default. Certainly, certain things associated with things like sensor technology, and so if there's something like, say, like China was probing our defenses with balloons, and that's what they suspect, this could be something that is a classified program where they don't want to talk about what they're doing in terms of countermeasures for that. And if they have even determined that inflatable radar reflectors like the one you're showing is responsible for this, it might be something that reveals vulnerabilities in our radar systems, and it might not. It might just be that it's such a default position that anytime something to do with radar comes up, you don't talk about it. We don't see the radar tapes from all these videos that came out, even though we know that the actual original video was half radar and half the video you see on screen, which is why the pixels are kind of stretched out horizontally. They had to chop off the radar from the left-hand side and just show you that the video. So radar is something that the military just doesn't want to talk about because it's something the enemy can exploit any knowledge of what you're doing with military radar. So because you've got this wall of secrecy, it allows the story itself just to fester, because no one's really addressing it other than kind of informal people like myself and you guys who don't have credentials. Mr. Ramsey probably has credentials, but I don't really have credentials. And you have credentials, like you kind of be a scientific background, but I'm just a former video game programmer.
We don't have access to all the information either. So,
indeed, we're lacking in that respect. But even if like some more mainstream scientists were to come out and do a detailed analysis, of the same level that I do with some of the videos, that would give it a lot more weight. Like recently, there was this hearing by NASA. And during the hearing, they did one of the guys there he doesn't work for NASA. He was like just someone on the panel. He did an analysis of the Go Fast video and said like it's probably not going very fast based on the numbers on screen.
What you'd said, I saw.
Yeah, it's what I did 3 or 4 years before that. But now someone from NASA is saying it. The media will take that aspect of it a bit more seriously. But we're kind of crippled because the people who should be doing the investigation, the people who should have investigated this every day there's a UFO in these military training ranges, are the military, but they don't tell you about the investigations that they do.
This is again the bit that just fascinates me so much about the original like whistleblower statement and all of this mind-bogglingly crazy stuff that apparently is just unclassified, because it's just not how the classification like processes work. The idea that like someone got this series of statements and is like, yeah, that highly classified program about retrieving a load of alien dead bodies. Yeah, it's okay to say that it exists. That's fine. And then that highly classified program that's reverse engineering the 40 ships. Yeah, it's all right to say that we've got 40 ships, even though numbers are actually normally the most classified part of programs. Any like detail as to what your level of knowledge or capability is. And it mind boggles me that all of those statements, I cannot picture the team working behind the desk going, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine,
Mhm.
that's fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
Ooh, said that the alien had two heads. Nope, I'll cross that one out. But saying the alien exists, fine. Next. Like it's so separated from reality in terms of how the declassification aspects of what would be the most staggeringly classified thing in the world.
Yeah. It kind of saying that like reminds me of there was a big reverse engineering program, a crash recovery program for that's Russian submarine that sank. Can't remember when it was exactly, 70s or 80s, something like that.
Yeah, it was Hughes. It was Howard Hughes built the Glomar Explorer, right? It was Project Genesis.
A custom boat to recover it. So it would be like saying, we have recovered a Russian submarine and we are reverse engineering it, but I can't tell you any details. The existence of that thing would be classified.
Itself, yeah.
Yeah. So they're allowed to say, being allowed to say these things. It just doesn't make sense. We go over and over, but trying to figure out how it could make sense, but it just doesn't seem to.
So do you think it's fair to say, Mick, just kind of summing up what we heard in the hearing, that it's kind of people trying to apply, exotic phenomena, kind of wild explanations to things where pretty banal explanations probably work fine? So I've seen a lot of people like Eric Weinstein, for example, saying, this is either the biggest cover-up that's ever happened in the world ever, or it's aliens. I mean, it seems like a lot of this stuff is just a very kind of simple false dichotomy that people are falling into, that, the aliens are among us, or there's a massive cover-up, when there's 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 other explanations, one of which is there are some true believers who think this is an important issue and are having their day in Congress, which seems like a perfectly serviceable hypothesis.
Yeah, it's I think in some ways the reality is a little bit stranger than some of the other possibilities. Not that it's stranger than aliens, but how we got here is a little bit bizarre. You just got to read like the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, the book George Napro, because it does actually give a fairly good, if you ignore all the ghosts and stuff, give a factual accounting of how people within the Pentagon are convinced of this strange stuff. There are people who believe weird things. I actually just read an article, I think it was on Fox. Not that I read Fox, but it was on Fox, and it was a former, I think, lieutenant colonel from the military, the American military, talking about how he thinks that UFOs are actually angels and demons, and he seriously believed it, and he wrote a long article on Fox, the Fox website, explaining how this explains what's actually going on. It's actually not aliens; it's some kind of spiritual warfare. There are people in the military, in the Pentagon, in the government, in academia, and in the world who have very strange ideas. And a small number of them get into certain positions, and things like this happen. It doesn't have to be aliens. It doesn't have to be a giant government cover-up. Yeah. There could be aspects of a cover-up. I'm sure that there are some shady programs going back into the past, but it doesn't mean it's actually aliens. So there's plenty of explanations. But whatever's happening, it is interesting. I kind of give him that. It's just perhaps not quite so earth-shattering as he makes out.
And I think this is a point that we should make. Like, none of us, I'm pretty sure I can speak for all of us, have any problem with this being looked into and poured over and people going into it and trying to work out what's going on. Yeah, I think it's often presented, Mick, that you're kind of, an effort to stonewall this and lead people away from it.
Not at all.
I think you're quite happy that if there is, if there are aliens there, let's see them. And if there are some interesting characters embedded in important military, positions, we should probably work out who they are, what they think, and the impact that they're having.
Yeah, I'd go full bore. I mean, I think things are going too slow. I want more investigations. Let's have more congressional hearings. Tim Burchett, have a hearing. Invite me, I'll come along. But get people to name names, get them to name locations, get them to bring their documents. Show it to as many people as possible in Congress, so somebody leaks it eventually, and let's get the information out there so we can figure it out. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and sunlight will get rid of the cockroaches, and let's figure out what's actually going on. Probably not aliens, but we've got to figure it out.
I think we'd all agree with that. So I want to slightly move on to the kind of meta. So we talked about kind of what came out, and it seems like kind of much ado about nothing, onto the kind of meta idea. So some of the ideas that people have said is like, look, the reason that this wasn't particularly earth-breaking is, that David Grusch is not free to speak openly on this. He talked or used the line a lot that, I can only talk about this in a skiff. I can only talk about this behind closed doors. What do you make of this line of argument that, David Grusch can't say any of these things that he wants to say out in the open? And, this is just the first step to kind of getting the ball rolling on getting all of these really important people in front of Congress. What do you make of that line of argumentation? It seems to me like a bit of something you could apply to any situation.
Well, it's very unfortunate, really, that he can't say anything. It leaves everybody in limbo and just serves to act as a springboard for promoting the narrative. Yeah. Hopefully, it would also act so we can actually move things forward. But the fact that he hasn't really provided any evidence for his claims in public it's a big red flag for me. We've kind of seen this type of thing before. People make claims like even people claiming to be first-hand witnesses, claiming to have seen things like evidence of alien bases on the moon and things like that. But when they're actually pushed to produce any evidence, they kind of fade away. I don't know what's going to happen with Grusch, but right now we're just in the stage where he's making claims and they're not supportable in public, and we haven't really heard any good indications from behind closed doors that people are being convinced by what he's saying behind closed doors. It's all, we need more information. So we're kind of in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment.
And how does that next part work? The secret skiff stuff, is that happening like this year? And then
does that happen like right after the hearing, that they go into a closed door session? Or I'm not sure how it works in the US.
It's a bit unclear, actually, because apparently before the hearing, he had already given 11 hours of testimony to congressional committees or Senate committees. I think it's the Senate Intelligence Committee, perhaps, or the House Intelligence Committee. So some Congress people have already heard his hidden testimony. But then, afterwards, during the hearing, he said, I had to do this during a skiff. And now people are claiming, on his team are claiming that he couldn't go into a skiff because now he has lost his clearance. Which doesn't really make sense to me. I'm not sure, being in a skiff in itself isn't a security breach if you're the one who's doing the testifying. But this is what Tim Burchett said. Not that Tim Burchett is the most, reliable person either. But it seems almost like making excuses for not getting into a skiff.
This sounds very
already
much
been
like
in
what
one,
happens, right? That there's big promises made, and then suddenly somebody's ill, or they decide they've been pressured and they don't want to be involved anymore, or the dog ate the homework. It all sounds very
certainly
kind of things that happen.
He's not going to get a security clearance ever again, so that's true. But this part makes no sense. Someone with no security clearance, who used to have security clearance, who still has the knowledge in their head, sitting in a room of people who all have the security clearances to then hear his information. that's all fine. And they would probably make him sign an NDA there and then again. And in the UK, you'd sign the Official Secrets Act again to make a statement that even though you do not currently have any clearances, you're not going to immediately go and tell everyone the stuff you just told them, that they go, oh shit, yeah, you're not supposed to know that, so please don't. So
yeah,
give him the Men in Black flashy thing afterwards. So
like that's just not true. Yeah. It's just someone with, I mean, that's a bit like a random member of the public discovering an alien spacecraft, trying to report it to somebody, and the person going, oh shit, you don't have the clearances to talk about alien spacecraft.
Yes.
No. Like, be silent forever. Like that, it's not how it works. So that sounds a bit confused. But
I
also,
think Bush might be misinterpreting what's actually going on. I think there's probably some other procedural reason for that. Like, but yeah, you're. I mean, obviously, there's nothing to stop him telling people things. It's him hearing things that's the issue, which they just wouldn't tell him.
That's a nice segue into the next point I wanted to make, because an argument that people put forward for the validity of all these things that people like Grusch are saying is that, this is under oath. Now he's in danger of punishment or even prison if he's lying. And that means that what he's saying is more likely to be true. I'm interested in what you think about that line of argumentation, because I noticed a couple of things when I was going through the transcripts, listening to little bits and pieces, is that there's a couple of layers of abstraction that I was noticing. One of them was that he talks about things that other people have said, in which case, how can you ever be quote unquote lying? Because somebody told me this and, I believe them, but I'm not telling you that happened. I'm telling you what they told me. And then another level of abstraction that he seemed to use quite regularly was, as I said on News Nation, rather than as I'm saying now. I said on News Nation that, alien bodies were dragged out riddled with bullets and whatever he said. But I'm not going to say it now in this important closed hearing. I push you to look at what I said previously. It seemed like there were a couple of potentially quite cynical levels of abstraction. And what do you make of this idea that because it's in a situation under oath that we should take it more seriously?
Well, the two pilots didn't say anything that they hadn't said before, and people were not accusing them of lying before. So it didn't really change anything for me. Grusch, I think there's some people who think he's making the whole thing up, and for them, I think that would actually give him more credence. The fact that he is saying, some of the same stuff. He actually said less than in his interview. But I'm with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Millet, who said he didn't think that that Grusch was lying. He thought that Grusch was telling the truth as he understood it. So he's trying to tell the truth. So I feel like Grusch is largely being honest within his own understanding of how everything is working. He's also kind of struggling with trying to say things that he thinks are classified and that he can't talk about them. And he's trying to work within that framework honestly still, and he's also to a certain degree trying to promote this narrative. Like he's said several times that he wants to be a leader, he wants to be a thought leader, he wants to basically essentially promote this investigation. So he's actually actively trying to drive it forward. So he's trying to juggle all of these things, which perhaps results in this sometimes kind of mixture of ways he says things, where he's trying to get something across in essentially an honest way, but trying to also balance his what he perceives as being his security restrictions.
So was there anything new at all said in these hearings? I picked out a couple of things. Ramsey, you were talking about these huge TARDIS vehicles. Grusch talked about the holographic principle and potentially extra dimensions. So I can maybe jump in on the science side with the holographic principle. So Grusch seemed to be saying, I can't remember, Ramsey, maybe you can remind me from the transcript what the kind of reason this was brought up and why he was talking about the holographic principle.
Yeah, so he's asked two questions in one quick go. One about how come if these aliens are so advanced, why do they keep crashing? One of those chestnut questions. And then quickly chucked in, is this something to do with like moving between dimensions? And so he quickly answered that planes crash, spacecraft crash, we crash boats, we crash cars, stuff crashes. And then, yeah, he then had a bit of a, bless him, physics word salad on general relativity and quantum and a bit of string theory, and brought up the holographic principle, which is not really related to how very large macroscopic objects might come in and out of reality. But so, as you say, your string theory is stronger than mine.
Yeah, which is to say not strong at all. I can't help but think that a lot of the things that he seems to say are kind of pop science word salad, or kind of very much, as Mick has pointed out, old stories, tropes within the UFO community. So he was talking about the holographic principle, and this is this idea that the universe could be, keep it simple, two-dimensional, and what we see as three-dimensional is, you know, a projection of that universe onto you know, a far screen, basically, if we want to say it in a simple way. But essentially what we see as all of these dimensions, they don't really exist. Just as we see a hologram, it looks three-dimensional, but the underlying universe is actually two-dimensional. And this is something that comes out of essentially things like string theory, where we're trying to marry up general relativity, which is our classical understanding currently of gravity, with quantum mechanics, the understanding of the very small world. And Grusch went off saying something like, you know, the holographic principle comes straight out of GR and quantum mechanics, which is just fundamentally wrong. Like, so it's an idea to marry up potentially those worlds, and that's the idea. It's not that it comes out of one or the other of these things, but he just kind of went off on one, which I found very strange. And, you know, he's been kind of put out as this guy who really understands deeply the physics, and he doesn't really seem to. Ramsey, another thing you dug up on was this idea of this this TARDIS, this massive craft that he seems to have pointed to, and you had a few problems with that on the physics side.
Yeah, well, just before we get off the just on the defense and classification side of things as well, again, just the bonkersness of what is supposedly classified and unclassified. If we had found a craft which had such an advanced way of moving that it could go in and out of the dimensions we live in and pop in and out, imagine what an amazing weapon you could build with that, to just pop into existence in some foreign country, drop a bomb and pop out of existence again and come away. The idea that the bit we're classifying is that, like, this thing's buried in the ground somewhere, but we're happy to let the world know that this thing,
that we can access other dimensions and skip between them at will.
Yeah, and we're trying to reverse engineer that bit. I think that would probably be the classified part of the story. So just on that levels of what's most likely to be the classified, unclassified stuff, the most likely thing here is that him saying stuff about interdimensional holographic principle stuff is nothing to do with any particular real program or document anywhere in existence. There's not a document that has holographic principle craft has been discovered. That bit is unclassified. So it just doesn't stack up. And then, yeah, the TARDIS stuff is just fun from the point of view of the physics games. So this was actually Ryan Graves, do you remember, who said this one, Mick, in the testimony? I think it was
Ryan Graves. He mentioned a football field sized craft, I believe, but they didn't mention the TARDIS aspect of it within the testimony. That was something that was, I believe, talked about in an article where they interviewed Danny Sheehan, who's one of the lawyers in their group, who talked about one of the other witnesses who hasn't come forward yet, who described seeing this craft that was bigger on the inside than the outside. So it wasn't actually one of the witnesses at the hearing.
Yeah, I have so many questions about that story. So,
Maybe
according to the story, they find an object which they bash with a bulldozer and a wedge-shaped bit breaks off. One person goes in to poke around finds out that it's like cathedral sized inside, even though it was quite little on the outside. They pop back out. They think they've been in there about 4 minutes, and apparently they've been gone for hours. Meanwhile, I suppose everyone just stood around going, well, how are we going to tell Bob's mum that Bob's gone missing inside this tiny little thing here that we could just pop our head into and go, Bob, what's going on in there? And then no one else went in, apparently, according to the information we've got. I mean, the whole thing is just so no one took a video. You know, they didn't get a bomb disposal robot and have that trundle in and record loads of video. You know, the whole story is so mad. But yeah, the paradoxes, the fun and games you could have with an object that had much more size on the inside than the outside. You could make a perpetual motion machine and get free energy. There's all sorts of aspects that maybe I'll write a few tweets about it rather than bore everybody with.
Yeah, right.
We can come back to it.
Fun science fiction.
Yeah, I think it's 3 physics-based paradoxes that I could come up with as to why it's not a goer. And if it was, we should immediately be using it to make free energy anyway.
So the last... Sorry, Mick, did you want to...
I just wanted to comment on the holographic principle thing real quick. Like, the diagram you show there is... the one you had with the intersections of the 3D.
So this was about the extra. This was more about extra dimensions, but
yeah, but I mean that isn't the holographic principle.
This is
the
not,
holographic principle is where you encode 3 dimensions in 2 dimensions, like you actually have a hologram, like you see on money sometimes, or they used to have them on magazines. But what Grusch is actually describing in his testimony isn't the holographic principle at all. It's actually the projection of a higher dimensional thing onto a lower dimensional thing.
Yes. That's another thing he gets wrong. He goes the wrong way.
Yeah. It's basically giving that. There's a famous talk by, I think, Carl Sagan, where he describes, what would happen if a 3-dimensional object passed through a 2-dimensional world and how it would be perceived, and then what would it look like if a 4-dimensional object passed through our 3-dimensional world, and maybe that explains, UFOs in some regard. But yeah, he's using the wrong terminology, and he's a guy supposedly with a degree in physics, and he obviously exactly is just doing some pop science version of something that he doesn't really understand. Which he does say he doesn't understand it, but he kind of makes out like he does understand it.
And people,
why is he believing it if he's got like no actual understanding whatsoever as to this actual basis for what he's saying is multidimensional? And
I don't claim to be an expert in this stuff either, but you're exactly right. He goes the wrong way. Instead of encoding this, this into the hologram, he's taking a higher dimension and putting it down into lower dimension, which again is totally wrong. So
I've been bashing the guy all the way through this, but to give him credit, he was probably on his 40th cup of coffee. It was probably
I'm sure he's I'm not saying he's a stupid guy at all. I don't think that at all.
Everyone makes mistakes, but it is interesting. It's another example. I suppose what it does give some evidence of here is that he doesn't mind leaning over his skis a bit and stating things that actually aren't right. And that's
it's speculation that he's indulging in there, but it is, I think, an important point, because it's a fairly fundamental part of what he is claiming to be happening. He made a point of saying non-human intelligence rather than extraterrestrials, because he wanted to include this interdimensional hypothesis, which is something that again kind of comes from this small group of people, specifically from Jacques Vallée, who's one of the founders of this small group of people who are behind this whole recent push for UFOs. He has this whole extra dimensional or interdimensional hypothesis, and I think it's just something that's got swept up in Grusch's kind of idea of what's actually going on, even though he really has no real understanding of the interdimensional aspects of it.
So that brings me on to the final little section I had, which is what's kind of happened since the hearing. So a couple of things have happened. There's been a response, as you would expect, from Aero and the Pentagon, and also David Grusch has gone on the BBC. So he went on the BBC on August the 3rd, so 5 days ago, for a very short interview. But there was a couple of interesting things that came out of that. So Grusch, again, reiterates this idea that we've been covering up aliens for 80 to 90 years. And he claims that the reason for that was a fear of ontological shock and that people were worried about the weapons that could have been developed had this been kind of common knowledge. Mick, did you make anything of these claims in that BBC interview, or any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, the claim of, that it's being covered up because they're worried about ontological shock. I mean, sure, maybe, like, the government doesn't want to tell people, but again, like, this would rely on a successful cover-up operation that's been going on for, like, 80 years or something, like, since the 1930s.
Which he claims all of the Five Eyes countries are involved with.
Yes, and other countries as well, like Russia and China, have their own programs of this type of thing, and nothing has leaked. It's it doesn't really make any sense. Like, sure, you think that that's one reason why they might not want to do it, and maybe they also want to keep the technology. But yeah, you can think of reasons why people would keep it secret. But the problem is, it's impossible to keep it secret. Yeah. Like, we're discussing things leak. There's been massive leaks of highly secure, like, diplomatic communications that were extremely embarrassing. There's been, like, all the WikiLeaks stuff. There's been Snowden. There's been Julian Assange. Like, all these people are getting things from deep within the government. And there was a bunch of top secret stuff that was posted on a Discord server, and some gamer, like some intelligence analyst who had high level clearance, like, just copied a whole bunch of documents and released them. So, the idea that nothing would have leaked in actual documents and photos and actual evidence, not just testimony, nothing would have leaked over that time, doesn't make any sense. And it's really something I think that he's never really addressed.
Ramsey, any thoughts? Because he seems to kind of try and get around this kind of famous image that is shown as well. I don't know how accurate the data is in this, but it gets across the idea that
it's not.
It's not. Okay, fine.
I mean, it's basically a English-speaking reports of UFOs.
So he tried to suggest that was the reason that, transparency is greater in the US. They have more of a culture of talking about these things, and there's a bias in the media towards reporting in the US. And that's why we see this being such a US centric phenomena, and these hearings going on in the US rather than elsewhere. So he tried to get around that as well at the same time.
Yeah, this came up a while ago, and it's like, why do UFO sightings stop at the border was the question. And I kind of fell for it initially, but then realized that the organization, I think it's NUFORC or something, which is it's essentially it's America and Britain, so it's English speaking countries, and obviously, like, UFOs aren't just English speaking, and it's not and there are UFO databases in other countries which aren't represented here. So the French have one, the Italians have one, and everyone else has them. And a lot of the countries you're looking at there are very sparsely populated, like Africa and South America and Australia. And China probably has their own databases as well. Yeah. But this isn't a very good representation of UFO sightings.
But the idea that multiple countries over multiple decades, where their allegiances between each other have shifted, the leaderships of those countries have shifted, their priorities have shifted, Ramsey. The idea that everyone's just kind of happy with this top level project where everything stays quiet about one particular issue seems just crazy. It's like Stargate level weird stuff where everyone just agrees, we don't talk about that, it's fine. And nobody ever kind of revisits that idea.
And heads of state changes where you've got one individual with lots of power who do that. Like, I mean, without meaning to get too political, we've just gone through what will hopefully be the only Trump era, my personal opinion. But you would have thought if anyone was going to take all of the credit of standing on stage and announcing that aliens existed, would have been Donald Trump. And I mean, he created Space Force, and I've actually just found some article that was written in January 2nd, 2021, New York Intelligencer. I could try and quickly send you the link.
I'll put it in afterwards, Ramsey.
I'll fire it over afterwards. So this article is basically saying that, Trump did promise to have a good look at what UFO knowledge there was inside the USA. And of course, these leaked videos did occur during his time. And so on and so forth. And you would have thought You would have thought if there was that list of unclassified but not yet in public domain statements that Grusch was just picking off for his whistleblower statement, Trump would have got there first. So I think that tells us a lot. Maybe some of the documents on the floor at Mar-a-Lago were the... maybe Mar-a-Lago is the TARDIS. Is it bigger on the outside than the inside?
It might very well be. So, Mick, the last kind of serious question I had was, there's been some pushback against all of these things that have been said by particularly by Grusch from AARO, so from the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is headed up by Sean Kirkpatrick, who went quite public, pushing back, being quite incensed at the idea that there was a cover up. We've also had the Chief of Staff, General Miley, like you flagged up, who said that he believes, Grusch is telling the truth as he sees it, but there's been no evidence for these kind of craft and bodies and things. What have you made of this kind of pushback from the Pentagon? Because it seems to have just within the UFO community been rolled into this idea. You did a poll that, maybe he's just lying, or maybe they're clueless. They don't know that, they just don't know this. And this is the idea of Grusch's complaint, is that this information isn't getting to, Congress and isn't getting to the people who need to know about it. What have you made of that tug of war between the Pentagon and Grusch?
Well, from my perspective, in the responses from the Pentagon seem fairly straightforward, and they seem honest. From what I've seen, I think Sean Kirkpatrick, he's the head of AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is the Pentagon office tasked with investigating UAPs, and it's also, I believe, tasked with the kind of documenting programs, the previous programs that study UAPs, and so they should be looking into that as well. And it seems to me that Kirkpatrick is doing a good attempt at that. The stuff he's doing is not ideal. Some of the presentation he gave at the NASA thing had some errors in it, and it was a bit contradictory in parts. And his response seemed a bit clumsy. He posted it on his private LinkedIn page, available only to his followers that he had connections to, which was a fairly small number of people. But it got leaked out, and he described things that didn't seem entirely accurate, about Grusch claiming to work for AARO. That kind of opened him up to criticism, and it seemed odd. But I think his response seemed genuine to me. He's angry that claims are being made that there's this active cover-up that he is part of, and that this cover-up involves harassing people and threatening people and even killing people. So he kind of views it as an accusation, if not against him personally, against members of his team and against people that he works with and knows. And so it seems to me his anger is genuine. So I kind of
that seems like a reasonable leap to make, right? If these very serious accusations of cover-up are being made, presumably the people who are involved in these things tasked with uncovering it are therefore part of the cover-up, or at least not doing their job well enough to uncover the cover-up. Yeah, no, I mean, lots of people have spoken from the Pentagon. There's a Pentagon spokeswoman, Susan Goff, who has kind of become a pariah in the UFO community. They literally hate her just because she says what the Pentagon's position is. And the Pentagon's position is that we don't have any evidence that anything is extraterrestrial. Same thing that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest ranking military person in the United States, second in command behind the president, said the exact same thing, that there's no evidence. He has seen no evidence of such programs. He has seen no evidence of alien activity. But the UFO community, a big portion of it, views it as being this big cover-up, and so they immediately think it's being suspicious. And I don't think it. I mean, I'm sure there are nefarious things going on at various levels of government and the military-industrial complex, but the idea that he has seen no evidence of aliens seems like a perfectly straightforward and honest thing that he's saying. Seems bizarre. Who's running this? If the chief of staff's not heard about it, people at the Pentagon haven't heard about it. They're either all lying or who the hell's running these massive programs that people just don't know about. So Mick, I guess the sum up of this is, Ramsey, do you want to
jump in? It comes right back around again to you lay together the pieces of information that we do have, that if the original whistleblower statement, which has been confirmed to not contain any classified information, if that stuff was true, then there'd be no reason for the list of people Mick has just said to lie about any of that perfectly fine, unclassified public information that could easily be popped on a government website as a summary of the programs, just like
it's been cleared.
It's been cleared.
Yeah.
And the key thing about having security clearances is you don't lie about truthful stuff that's uncleared. You're not supposed to be an untrustworthy person who lies about stuff. You lie to cover up the top secret stuff. That's fine. But it's very suspect to lie about public domain, truthful things. Being an untrustworthy character who chooses to lie about some stuff that's true in the public domain is strange. And so these things just don't add up together. The only steps that make sense is that it's truthful, that there's no evidence of any of this stuff, and that this statement that went through a publication clearance process might as well have been about Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny, because the Department of Defense would have gone, none of that stuff is classified. Tell your story about Santa Claus, it's fine. And, it's not looking good if all of these people are not able to state the same unclassified public statements, such as we have alien bodies. So it's not looking good.
So Mick, just to kind of put a line under this, because I know we have to finish fairly quickly. Where do you think this is going? What are we going to get now? Is it going to be more hearings? Is this going to rumble on? What do you think the next stop on the road is?
I think there's another report coming out in August, which is this month, the end of this month. I can't remember who it's from, perhaps Arrow. But there was a report due. NASA is going to issue a report. They're going to say, there's no evidence of aliens. We're looking into it. There's sensor issues. There's, areas of concern and interesting things happening, but, no evidence of aliens. And, that'll just continue. That type of thing, I think, will just continue indefinitely, of course, because we're always going to have things that are unidentified in the sky. With Grusch, I hope that they look into it. And they'll probably have some other hearings. I mean, hopefully the other people will come forward and we'll hear from these first-hand witnesses. But we need to get some actual evidence. If we just have a litany of people coming forward, saying things that are unverifiable, and then testimony that happens in secret that never gets revealed to anybody, we're not going to move things forward. But, it makes for lots of interesting podcasts for the next few years.
Yeah, seems to be where we're going. So Mick, Ramsey, I'd like to thank you both for taking the time today. Mick, just a little shout out just to reassure the fans. A lot of people seem to think that you've kind of retired into the background. You're going to be living in the woods. You're in the back room with a bottle of whiskey and a rocking chair with the shotgun. You're going to cast it all in. Just let the fans know that you're still feeling mentally sound.
I'm doing fine. I don't need a wellness check or anything. You're
not suffering ontological shock.
No, that would be great if we just go with aliens. But the thing is, like, most of the stuff I do is investigate UFO videos. And if the Pentagon comes out and says, actually, we have evidence of crashed alien craft, and some of these videos actually show aliens, one, that would be great.
Yeah.
Really interesting. And two, there's still going to be loads and loads of UFO videos that people think are aliens, even though they're not. So I'll still have things to do regardless, and we'll be in much more interesting times, and science will be revolutionized. So it'd be a win-win-win. So bring it on.
So Mick is still in a healthy state, and he's quite happy. So thank you for your concern, but he's okay after the recent recent revelations. Mick, I'll make sure all of your links, all of the excellent work you've done recently, your Twitter, everything else is down in the description. Ramsey, likewise with your stuff. Thank you very much again for both taking the time. I really, really appreciate it. And, next time the wheel turns a notch, I guess we'll get back together and discuss what's going on then. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Okay,
Cheers,
thank you.
Take
Cheers,
care.
mate.
See you again soon. I want to know what you think, because you're the scholars of enlightenment that I do this for. So please take a moment, if you wish, to let me know down in the comment section. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, setting up notifications, and sharing this video more widely. I can't tell you how much these simple actions help me out and how much I'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being scientific. Thanks for being bad.